Okay. It would be laughable if it weren't really seriously this difficult. So this morning was over 2.5 hours of going live. So as you notice, I've been offline for a little while. We have created all the collateral. We're marketing through other channels. We're doing phenomenal in really providing a lot to this community. So if we're not here, we're somewhere else, and we'll make it easier for you to find us. But it's really interesting. Before I get into Candace Owens and quite a bit that's going on that's really serious that has taken us offline, and just to give you a taste of where we're going, I've been in court working with the FBI, the San Jose Police Department, Santa Clara County, because an 82-year-old woman was removed from her home that she'd owned for since 1980s, and ended up getting arrested and put in jail. It's ridiculous. But there's a lot we're going to go over until we get to that point, and how poorly she is being treated. Um, and I am being treated, and you are being treated. And you may not think this, but I often remember the comment I would tell my dad every time I went to Safeway, I was overcharged. If I bought one item, overcharged. If I bought 5 items, probably 3 to 5 were overcharged. And he said that that's ridiculous. He goes there all the time and they've never overcharged him. So I said, get in the car. We went over there. I let him randomly pick some items, and it's been years now, so I can't really remember how many he chose, but he picked what he wanted. And we get up to the front, and every single item, everyone, 100%, he was overcharged on. The difference is he didn't care about prices. He never looked at what the sign said when he picked it up, and he didn't look at what came up on the cash register when he was paying. They just said, give me money, and he always pays in cash. And so he's been ripped off all these years, but no, other people are ridiculous. It never happens to him. And so as I labeled this video this week, Private Eyes on You, we're really going to go into a long conversation, and this will be long form today. So feel free to come back later if you want to, and then listen to it on a faster speed. If I can put in breaks or timestamps in here, I'll do my best. But again, it took hours to get this up and running, and we finally thought we had it going, and then it said live stream not available every single time. So it is what it is. We're also looking for an alternative platform because clearly OBS is not functioning with the software we have or any platform. And I can't show the screen. It shows me on my multiple monitors that in fact the screen is being shared. And so I go through and point out different key, really receipts, right? And then the last video, as you saw, it just showed OBS the whole time. Even though live when I was watching it, it was showing me and the screen shares. For some reason that was taken down and the OBS overlay went on it. And we can't continue like that. You know, it really strikes me, especially watching Minnesota right now. There's a lot of individuals who are able to just live stream everywhere, and they don't seem to be the sharpest tools in the shed. So this brings me back to Private Eyes on You. Why is some equipment being suppressed and some individuals allowed just to go live anytime, anywhere? It is what it is, right? So anyways, welcome back to the channel. My name's Barbara. This is Tech Reality. I'm talking to you straight from Silicon Valley. During lockdowns, I did quite a few recordings of the area showing that even gas stations were covered with the wired construction fencing, so you couldn't even get gas. And I would go through tech companies as far back as, or as most recent as just a year ago. This time last year, you could go by Google at 10 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and there might be 5 cars in the parking lot. Meta, Facebook, same thing, empty parking lot. Any of the companies you want to talk about, I filmed parking lots of them absolutely, they still were not having their employees go to work. And this has hit our country really hard. And I'm going to talk about the depths of what has been hidden from us while we were forced to stay at home. And even if you're not in California or Silicon Valley, you have been deeply affected and your life will never be the same because of the lockdowns that we had in Santa Clara County and the influx of H-1B visas that were pulled in to replace Americans. And I'm going to go deep into that conversation and a little bit. In fact, I'll see if I can pull up the overview that was sent to the news this week as well. But where I wanted to start was the concept of private eyes on you. You know, during the 70s and 80s, reports came out that the CIA in San Francisco alone had over 10,000 paid informants. Now, this didn't mean that they had 10,000 people living in San Francisco that were on the government payroll. This means that they were sliding people cash. That could have been the person that ran the laundromat. That could have been the bus driver, maybe a neighbor down the hall, anybody that was corrupt enough to take money to tattle on people around them. Now, during this phase, people still primarily kept to themselves. But you know, right now we're in a world where, although a lot of money is flowing for that reason, people tattle on everybody. It's it's just shocking to me. It's absolutely absurd, the level of behavior that we have. And so I want to go into that a little bit today as well. And if you're on there, let me see if I can put this here. And so I just want to say welcome to anybody, and feel free to join in the conversation if you have anything to add. I'm going to keep glancing down so I can see that as much as possible. Move this back a little bit. So the concept, are you being watched? Yes, you are. And there's nobody here that's going to argue with me on that. There's nobody that's going to say, absolutely, I'm not being watched. We know we are. We know we are. If you have a phone in your pocket, you're being monitored. If you have Wi-Fi in your home, we've known for a long time that an individual, let's say in Russia as an example, or Latvia, or you name a country, can log on to the signal, and based on the movements and the size of the way that the wave of the Wi-Fi goes through your home, they could see how many bodies and movement were in your house. Adults, children, pets. They could tell that. And they have for forever. I mean, I found out about 20, 25 years ago. It's been much longer than that. As soon as any kind of Wi-Fi or signal was allowed in the house, it could be monitored. So yes, we're being watched. We know too that California, as an example, had new laws come into place on January 1st. It's ridiculous. Why do we pay people to create more and more rules? They need to start taking their opportunity to review the rules we have and remove them. We started out with 10 basic commandments, and that seemed to, well, I guess we can't even say that worked. That ended up going into tens of thousands of rules immediately. But really, the 10 simple rules do cover about everything. So with the new rules in California, we see the priority of you being watched. Those flock cameras that people can hack into and spy on anything are now open for any government agency and non-government agency anywhere in the world to spy on you, to watch car movements. Now, in Silicon Valley and in most areas in the United States, they've put cameras on the garbage trucks for years. And what they do is they grab license plates. So they monitor patterns. Who is being connected with which people, where do the cars go, when are they moved? They're tied into the whole system. And so garbage trucks would go through on a regular schedule and start monitoring friendships or work patterns or different in depths that we've never been able to find out about, because garbage trucks are contracted out. They're not government. So Freedom of Information Act or California Open Records Act just does not pertain. It's that barrier. So these flock cameras that they put up, they're now at about every street light. It used to be probably a handful of areas or jurisdiction across the United States had cameras, and they've been challenged in court over years. Most of them have been overturned and had to be removed. They just changed the rules of the game. And so now if you look at the map of the United States, you'll see that these flock cameras are in every state. I didn't see Hawaii and Alaska on the map, but I do know that Hawaii has them. So it just wasn't included on the map, but they're in every state and throughout the state. When you see the maps, the red dots are everywhere. They're tracking everything, and it's all tied into one network. But what's interesting, in California, a lot of laws came in on January 1st. And one of the laws was, I don't know, something serious with traffic. If you're driving down the freeway and there's an emergency vehicle, you need to slow down and move over if possible. So if that emergency vehicle is pulled off to the road and has its flashing lights on, you need to slow down and move over if possible. However, the fine for that as of January 1st extends to if any car is disabled on the side of the road, you need to slow down and move over. So there's an extension there to any car from just cars, vehicles that have flashing lights and emergency response. So now any vehicle disabled on the side. Okay, so the fine for that, if you don't slow down and you don't move over if possible, is $150. Well, in theory, it's enough to say ouch, but they put all their fees on top of it, so maybe it's $500. I don't know, but the actual fee amount is $150. But what's interesting with these flock cameras, and by the way, during COVID in Silicon Valley, somehow, without us being able to talk about it or vote on it or participate in the discussions in a viable way, they changed our freeways to fast track. So Southern California had some, and Northern California, I don't think anywhere did, but not in Silicon Valley. And during COVID, they started repaving the roads, putting new lines on it, putting up big poles while people were locked down in their homes. And step by step, they implemented a pay-for-use fast lane. And it varies significantly. It started out at 15 cents. And sometimes I'll see 30 cents. I'm sorry, $30. And that can be from one on-ramp to the next. So you don't even have time to get over to that lane and back off again. Now, in theory, it's supposed to be for a several mile stretch, but not all of the counties wanted to play the game. And so there's some areas where it had to stop and they've had to renegotiate, and now it's being rolled out now that we're several years into this. But those lanes used to be for individuals who were riding carpool, right? It's called the carpool lane. So this makes sense. If you're helping the environment, which is always the key word, and you're commuting back and forth to work with another person in the car, it was just two or more, because the majority of the cars are just one, right? We have our personal vehicle that we use to get from A to Z because you can't rely on any kind of public transportation. And as an example of that, I decided to test that theory. So I went to go to my light rail from my home. So by car, it's about 4 minutes. By bus, it was almost an hour and 40 minutes. I can't even figure what route they ended up taking. But that's the way it is, right? And so as we've moved forward, the flock cameras have gone up, and we've got fast track that really wants to charge you money to use their particular lane, which last I checked, I've paid for that with my tax dollars. It's not really about carpool anymore. Sure, you can get a discount if you have more people in your car, and if you buy their upgraded monitor, the old one you have won't work. And then you have to remember to set it to how many people you're in the car. And then it'll validate that is in fact how many warm bodies are in your car. It's just they're moving the goalpost. However, a lot of individuals have plate covers or something fancy on their plate. So you can't necessarily see it, or if it reflects the sun, or maybe it's cutesy. If you've got one of those in your car, that now costs, well, let me pause a moment. How much do you think that would cost? We just $150 if you don't slow down for a safety incident on a freeway. Okay, more than 9 times more. It's almost 10 times more, right? It's $1,000 if in any way you've covered your plate so the government, one, can't track you, and two, can't charge you to use this express lane. And by the way, all day long, even if we're in low traffic, there might be 2, 3 cars on the freeway, there are still fools in that lane because somebody else is paying it. They don't realize that they're paying for it. I don't understand. But now it's $1,000, not if you violate anything other than somehow you've created a mark or cover up on your license plate. But what's interesting are the priority. It isn't about health or safety. It's about spying on you and money collection. Yes, private eyes are on you. I had another thought there, and I'll have to come back to that as I streamline this. But there isn't a place you go now, and the thing in your pocket, whether you're watching me on it right now, tracks your every move. Everywhere you go, people say, hey, you want to put an app on the phone? It's easier. No, it's not easier. Apps have special access to your phone. They may ask permissions. They don't need you to say yes or no. As soon as you put an app on your phone, they have full access to everything on your phone. They can turn on your camera without a light. They can listen to your phone calls. They can read your text messages. They can see all your keystrokes. Everything. Why would you put somebody's app on your phone? That makes no sense. How much more difficult is it to go to the website, which has enough problems? So as we're talking about, are you being watched? Yeah, we can all agree that yes, we are being watched. And to what degree? Often we chalk it up to maybe technology. I don't know if I'm being watched, but something seems odd. So why would it take so many hours for me to go live this morning? My setup doesn't move. I've been trying new software, but I leave the setup the same. It should take minutes to click on it, go live, and go. But that's not what happens. Now, when I worked at Intuit, individuals would call in and I'd listen through to the different calls, and they would say, my software doesn't work today. Well, I can go in the back end and see that they had a software push the night before. And I also knew the teams that were doing the pushes had no business touching the software. They were constantly breaking the software. And in doing so, you know what the company did, because this is the right thing to do, blame it on the customer. They had tiers of let me see if I can grab this here. They had tiers of ways to look at whether or not it was their issue or your issue or a global issue. And they would always go to user error. You don't know what you're doing. Really? People would say they're accountants and they'd use the software for decades. And yet all of a sudden I could see on the back end what was changed, and that was what had made a ripple effect and was taking down software. But Intuit not only didn't want to help them or be accountable for what they were doing, they have a scoring system. So if you complain too much or you complain too loudly, they will ban you. But it doesn't stop there. All the tech companies that have some kind of incoming customer service are using a similar software program. And so let's say that Intuit is charging you $10,000 a year, but blocking you access. You're having to call in multiple times a month in order to get back on their tool that you're paying for, that they don't stop charging you. At some point, you might get angry. And somehow that's your fault. Well, then what if you call into another company? You may not be able to get to them. You may be asked to leave a message for a callback. You may be asked to send an email, and you'll just think, oh, that's the technology they have, because it's a social credit score. If the companies don't like the way that you've reacted when they're manipulating you, then you don't get to play anymore. This is very, very real, and this is what's happening. And the mind manipulation that we see around that is so insane that we don't believe that it's even happening. In fact, people who question it have behavior issues. And I'm going to go into that behavior issue when I get to my conversation about the Department of Labor. If they don't want you to ask questions, they will blame you for something that hasn't even been done. And when that happens, you know, whoa, crazy town. Rather than arguing, hightail it on out. So I wanted to talk about Candace Owens here to start. There's, I've got a lot of pages of notes here, so I'm going to kind of stay on as long as Google allows me as a guest, I guess it is. And I'm hoping that, let's see if this will click on too. I'm hoping that this at least stay on live today and we can go through this. So, Candace Owens. Candace put out a tweet, I guess, is it still called a tweet, to the world, and said, just for the next week or day, whatever, how many days it was, could we not have the pastors of this country attack me? Just for a short period of time. What's very interesting is that very Sunday, even my pastor stood from the pulpit mid-sermon, said Candace Owens is crazy, and then moved on. There wasn't a preface. There wasn't anything after that. It was extremely out of place and odd. And I chose not to highlight it and bookmark it and show it because I'm not about doxing anybody or showing somebody in a poor light. But many of us have been watching Candace Owens, whether doubtful or not. I mean, I first got introduced to her when she was very eloquently sitting in front of Congress. She knows her back. She knows how to research. She knows how to use her words, and she speaks intelligently. And yet she constantly is being set aside, put down, crazy town. And I will say that the one thing that has saved her was her marriage. As the craziness ramps up, we need somebody to lean on. And at that moment, she said that she knew as soon as she saw George that that was her husband. She knew that that was the plan. Having a husband to cry on his shoulder, she has many times, she said. And then the children to bring laughter. She's got an insulation there that is creating a mental stability that she definitely needs. And people who are alone in this world get separated from the flock, blocked from family units, and don't have that checks and balances as a reality as to who they are and what is actually what the gaslighting is around them. So she holds a lot of things back, and she's still crazy, right? She's building a narrative here, and I believe she knows where she's going. I believe she's very clear on the outcome, but rather than just making one statement and having it go away, she's done a phenomenal job of building the narrative, exploring a lot of options and pulling it together. Some pathways she's had to make a U-turn. Some pathways she's had to let just sit a little while. And it sure is interesting when she went on her vacation or break, there was so much every day that came out and attacks against her, and she hadn't even spoken in, I don't know, 7-10 days, whatever day it was that there was another attack against her. And then we found out that there was an entire bounty. You could go online And you could participate in a crowdsourced bounty where someone, and they've identified where the funds came from, could say that if you had 1,000 followers and you use these particular words in this image, and then you could prove it back to the site, you could get $200 or $10,000 or whatever it was based on the viewership you had. And so we started seeing even individuals who typically were on her side, maybe not 100% backing her, but at least on the right side versus the left side, started turning on her. And they were all using the same words. It was pulled from the bounty site. What's really odd is Tim Pool and Jones seem to have participated as well. Same words, same timeline, same uproar. Because we're all being watched, we're all being handled, and we're all being manipulated. You push somebody's buttons enough, even somebody who stays down the middle of the road and doesn't want to pick a side will be pushed off balance and have to step onto one side or the other. And if it doesn't work with money, it'll work with fear. So this last week, she talked more about Andrew Colvett and different things that he had said to her via text. One of them was very, very interesting, and it got me thinking. Apparently, after the Amfest, with the one where Tucker was invited, even though Charlie was told not to have Tucker and definitely not to have Candace, Andrew apparently texted Candace, "Are you a witch?" Now, that's not something that you normally ask people. But then his explanation as to why he asked got even more bizarre. And so, as we've unraveled the story, and I believe that Mr. Let Go and Coach Colin has taken this the furthest in that direction, we've looked down what that is. Now I don't want to deviate too much because we've really seen a lot of information come out here, especially with Huachuca, San Francisco, the particular organization that highlights somebody else other than God, the board member linked to that. A lot of manipulation, and it doesn't take much to get somebody off path. It can be an extra job opportunity, extra money in their pocket, promise of wishes. In this case, a promise of the world could have been there. But to ask somebody if that's what they are, based on the reasons given, in my mind, I think the person was fearful of what they were doing and wondering if they were going to feel the wrath. Well, we'll see how that unravels. The other issue there is he had said that it should have been her. And I think Coach Colin, who, by the way, stated he's not even a real coach. I don't know his history, but I'll give it to Coach Colin. Shout out. He's one that came up only because you two fed it to me, right? And I see this goofy guy with another beanie on, mushroom on his hand. He's explained that. Always have a hoodie up over his beanie, often wears glasses. Is up through the night in order to pump these last minute videos out. I just kept clicking them off quite a bit. Just didn't seem to really be with the quick information that I needed. Except that I started listening to him. He's very insightful. And shout out, Coach Colin. You're really pulling this all together. It's been really interesting to hear your theories. And the theory that you presented with with Andrew, I think it was probably in the last 24 hours, was very, very interesting. That it doesn't mean that on that day, which I don't think none of us believed or even thought that, but we were looking at the pathway or the breaking point, and the way that the two of them came up together, and then the directions of what happened, quite honestly, Candace could keep her mouth shut. And the louder she got, as Coach Collins said, the crazier she could be, like, yay, it actually bought them freedom. At some point, individuals are like, hands off, we can't control this one, we're just going to let them go. Mockery time, right? It's either that or removal. And for some reason, the constant firings and pushing in another direction, Candace at one point a couple weeks ago said, if not for everything that's been going on, she would be a billionaire. And I believe very much so. She's an extremely savvy individual and speaks out. She just speaks out for the wrong team. So those conversations are really pulling together what is actually going on. And I'll let that sit a little bit more as we see that's come together. But yeah, it appears Fort Huachuca is very real for a lot more reasons than many of us would ever even conceive if we were reading a wild storybook. So it's been interesting as this story has come apart, because we now have Coach Colin, Baron, and I'll talk more about Baron Coleman, and kudos to Baron, really pulled together a phenomenal show, funny to watch, entertaining, with a lot of community. He allows people to sit in and participate in the conversation. And Mr. Let Go. Now, Mr. Let Go from the beginning has said that this has to do with tadpoles. I didn't really believe him. Now, I know that everything right now has to do with tadpoles and manipulation and path, but I didn't really believe him for the reasons that he said it went that direction. However, as more and more comes out, and his theory about the airplanes, I doubt that's not true. Now, to what degree, I don't know. I really think he's on top of it. So it'll be interesting as that continues to develop. It just seems that Turning Point literally became a turning point for this country and the world's eyes on it. It became a cesspool for anything that you could think of that would be of the devil. The gross manipulation of people's finances, going into one person and not just taking a $5 donation, but even seizing homes now, entire estates. For what? To pad their own pockets through individual LLCs that suck money out of this nonprofit. It's just sickening. And now we're learning more about movement and involvement in multiple trafficking. Now, I don't know the story of Sachin, and I don't think it was true. I don't have evidence one way or the other. And again, I don't play people on here in order to go after them. But there's a number of things in there that I say no, especially when he came to the letter T. I absolutely no. And again, that's just where that's at. However, the underlying concept of what he was talking about, 100%. Moving people around is much easier than moving drugs or weapons. The excuse he said is, well, I'm just taking this kid to his family for him. Okay, go ahead. there's no real check who the family is or why the kid is going or if the kid's on drugs or unconscious or okay. But if you've got stacks of the other contraband, there's going to be a question and seizure. So it's easier to move people and you can use them over and over again. Well, until you choose not to, I guess, that final moment. So we've got here Coach Colin and Barron and Mr. Let Go and Candace. Those seem to be the core players. And then in the middle row, we have Tucker and Megan that have been kind of caught in the middle. Fingers pointed at them and attacked, as Coach Colin would show on his screen. He shows all the Philadelphia mints at this point. Yeah. And then we've got Tim Pool and Jones. What's going on there? Tim has always kind of sat on a fence. He's leaned in a direction, but he really wants to be neutral. He wants to keep his business going. So it seemed very odd to see the mental breakdowns that were happening. But then again, his family was threatened. And it appears he probably accepted a bounty. Alleged, I don't know. That's just based on what we've seen. And then we have all the leftists. And that's just crazy town all the way around. We'll just leave that at that. Okay, so another conversation coming up has been that of the GATE program, the Gifted and Talented Education. I believe it stands for. I could be wrong. So I remember GATE was very big in the school that I went to, the elementary school that I went to. And many of us were tested. I don't remember actually if I passed or not, or was accepted or not. I don't remember. And the reason I don't remember is I was constantly being held back. And at some point, my mother awakened to the manipulation, and that was about the time of GATE. So I would have to ask her whether or not, if she had me tested or not, because I do know that I would be pulled out of classes and brought into a special room and do special puzzle type systems. And I don't think there's anything uncomfortable about it, but I knew I was missing class and I'd rather be in class so I didn't have to make up the work later or the understanding later. That didn't go on very long. So I don't know how that worked. But I do know that in second grade, I had to go into my teacher. My father was so adamant I had to stand up for myself, and I was a wallflower. I didn't want to say anything to anybody. But what I did is I went into the teacher and I said, I want to be in the higher learning program, because I had no doubt that I had the ability to read at a much higher level, both speed and comprehension, and then of course the vocabulary and spelling that I had mastered. The answer I was given were there weren't enough spaces. Well, how could there not be enough spaces? And that's a memory that has shifted my entire life, because as I've gone through life, we've seen there's not enough spaces. We live in an extremely abundant world, and especially in the United States. And yet there's not enough spaces for the blonde kids. And we'll pause that there. But I was told that there wasn't enough. And so I remember in second grade turning around, grabbing a chair, and pulling it up towards the circle where the class was about to meet. And I said, look, there's space right here. And I sat down. And that's not for me to do. And I was allowed then to be in that reading program, because you know what? There was space. And I remember finishing the entire book series or whatever whatever they were doing way before anybody else. So I do know that constantly I've been held back. Another example was taking all the AP classes in college and graduating with so many credits. I only had 3 years of university to take, less than 3 years of university, which now it's, use Sophia or study.com. People are doing it all the time. Back then, people did succeed and used AP credits, but it wasn't like I was putting in a lot of extra time. I was just overlapping the time I had, and everything was so easy for me that I could push right through it. But what's interesting is they had a program called MESA. And I recently came across, and I talked about that on one of the other videos, MESA. And it had to do with an engineering accelerator program for handpicked individuals in the public schools. And it was primarily for what they considered migrants, whatever that could be, whatever culture that seemed to be, as long as you were migrant. And it also seemed to be focused towards low income, but that wasn't necessarily in my area how it came together. I don't know. But I heard about the program. I wanted to be part of I wanted to be an aeronautics engineer. That was my whole goal. I wanted to be somewhere designing airplanes and moving towards the world of the Jetsons, which has been a very interesting pathway, as you know, my history. But I was not allowed to participate in MESA because no blonde-haired kids were allowed in, none. And what's so interesting, as I've talked about many times before, those who were pulled into it were partiers, they're goof off. Some of them were straight A students, but they weren't necessarily the best and the brightest. And when we fast forward, I've kept in touch with that group because they've been my friends, and they meet together out of this group multiple times a year. And so I've gone to different reunions, and I'm the only person that went on to any sort of an engineering career. None of them did. So why were those resources pulled away and put in that direction? Well, again, are you being watched? Are you being handled? You being manipulated? Are some doors open for you and some not? The answer is yes. Some people got pushed down this way, some people got pushed down that way, and some people stood at the doorway and the doorway slammed in their face. What about PR? Now, we know marketing. When you are in a store and your phone might go on and direct you towards a particular aisle, or a YouTube video comes up, you start to realize that, wait, I just saw this on the shelf, now I'm seeing the ad. Well, what about if you work for a company and their PR department is saying, let's not do that. That might not look as well as some of the other things. Or, you know what? We probably shouldn't say those words. Or when we have the picture on the website, we have to show these individuals, even though they don't work here, but it looks better for society. There's so many different ways that we're manipulated and held back. So again, going back to private eyes watching you, this is just the first layer that I wanted to talk to today. And this is really stemming from what Candace Owens is bringing out there. And as I mentioned, when my pastor stood up in front of everybody on that Sunday and said, Candace Owens is crazy, after she challenged pastors not to speak about her, she then showed the next week almost a dozen pastors that decided not to listen to that calling, and in fact call her out. I don't think my pastor has ever been in a room with her. Sorry, I gotta look her here. But why in the world would this is good. You can look over here. Look, look. There we go. Kind of shy. It was just odd. Like, where did that come from? Why would he even say that? And when does a pastor ever stand at the pulpit and call anybody crazy? The whole situation of individuals speaking up who have no right to speak up in that manner. Okay, so I want to move on beyond that, because we've talked again about San Francisco in the 70s and 80s having more than 10,000 paid informants. And the need is not as big right now because you have your informant in your pocket. And the vernacular of human beings, or at least the culture in the United States, is to tattle on every. Hi, sweetie. Okay, come on, lay down. So we don't necessarily have the need for all those agents, but we've seen recently the planned negative activity against the governor of, what was that, Michigan, where they manipulated an individual or group of individuals in order to do something that they would not have otherwise done, and then arrested them for it. I don't know who we can trust, but yes, private eyes are on you. Now, about 15 years ago, I was in Singapore, and when I go to different countries, I usually prefer to take public transportation because it works, right? Not like here, it works, but I don't have to get in somebody's car that I don't know, and I want to stay in main places anyways where a bus might be, so that there's people around. I don't want to stray off at all. And in Singapore, they had a video right behind the driver, and it was playing on a loop. And it would tell you how to think and how to behave. So if somebody approached you in the bus, how to politely have a conversation with them. If somebody sat too close to you and it was a feeling of danger, how to create a little bit more space but still have a smile on your face. It was absolute manipulation, giving one cue out of after another on how to behave. And yeah, it just, even at the time, it struck me as manipulative and propaganda. And I wasn't even in China at that moment. So what I have seen is the quality of our questions really dictate the quality of our lives. If you can figure out deeper, better questions to ask, you can avoid a lot of problems. And are you done? You want to get down? He wants to go for a walk. We're not walking right now, okay? So I was working with the CEO yesterday, yesterday, and I was showing ChatGPT. Now, it could have been any of the AI models. That's just the one that we were going back and forth with. And I would have him go ahead and enter something on his side, and I'd enter something on my side. And we know that is prompt. The prompt quality really matters, because the information he was getting was very informational, but it didn't 10x where we were going, didn't go deep enough, and it fell short. What I got were entire roadmaps based on evidence and facts and resources and images, just total outcome. And it was really because of the quality, what we call prompt again, but the quality of the questions. Okay. Can you get down now? I don't think he's gonna leave quite yet. Okay. Are you going down? Okay, he's done. Okay, here you go. Okay. So as we look more with how we're being watched and the manipulation that we're getting, we really want to look at what are the quality of our questions. Are we grounded? Are we asking from resources that can actually give valid responses? So what we've also seen in the news over the last few weeks or month is what's going on in Minnesota, Minneapolis. Nick Shirley, who did phenomenal coverage during lockdowns and border and has just done a great job as he's been learning, as he's been out there with a microphone, would stand in front of these shops and just ask basic information about an open business. You put this down here, California. And the response wasn't, no, can you please come back? Or here's a business card to call us. Or it was yelling and screaming and swearing at him. And if he didn't have his security around him, there were multiple times that it looked like a very fearful situation. In fact, others have stated when they haven't had security, like the individual David that's with him, that was doing this on his own for many, many years, I think about a decade. He talked about right before Nick showed up, the aggressive attacks against him that hurt him. Multiple. He'd been watched. I know that what Robert's channel, Watching the Watchers, who's watching who? And yet who has authority in order to make a difference? I don't know. At this point, wars and rumors of wars, right? Okay. So more and more researchers are now starting to look into childcare in California. So they've done the same thing. They've gone to the California state website and pulled list of child care facilities in California that take government funds. Now, the funds, in my understanding, come from both the state and also from federal. And I don't know the percentage or breakdown, and I don't know much about that system. But what I do know is I'm a single mother. And when my son was born and I was going through a divorce, I strapped my child to my chest to go to interviews and try to start jobs because sitting home was not going to be an option. And yet, in order to do that, I had no choice but to take my child because I didn't have any money at that point. I didn't have any resources. And in order to put your child in childcare, you needed to either be approved in a program or you had to have a lot of money. Childcare was more money than I could even earn. Even if I got a job, I could not afford to put him in childcare. So I was really hustling and trying to figure out how I was going to take care of my child and get back into the workforce. I had been let go while I was pregnant. So that wasn't a planned leave or a pregnancy leave or vacation like Buttigieg and his partner got for adopting a child. My employer found out I was pregnant, and in the whole slew of harassment that they had been doing for years, that was their push. So as people are pulling information in California from the website and driving to different locations, they're finding out two different pathways. And Nick Shirley hasn't talked about the other side of this yet. And this is what we really need to understand, the opportunity cost. Now, this is similar to Haiti. After any major disaster in Haiti, the United States steps up. They want to do all they can to help that community. So they start bringing in airplanes filled with water bottles and food and clothing and shoes, books, just bring it all into them, building materials. Well, Haiti has a local economy. Why would you go down and buy water when you just got cases of free water? You're not going to go down and buy food when you just got cases of free food. What about a new shirt or jacket or shorts or socks or shoes? No, it was just free. All those small businesses were pushed out. The economic challenge that John Perkins talked about, what was it, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, hadn't even come into play at that point. They weren't securing money to build bridges. They were just opening their eyes and shaking their head from a major earthquake or a major disaster, and all of a sudden all this flow of help flowed in. It's not the kind of help that they needed. Their society needed some kind of a baseline, and they didn't get it. Similar to what's going on in Iran right now. And I'd say right now, I haven't checked the news since yesterday, so I don't know where that stands. But the Iranian people that have been in the United States for decades constantly go in front of our US Congress and say, do not support the Iranian regime. Do not give them money. They want to go home. And the people that live there want their lives back. But the United States government, to help them out via USAID or State Department programs or whatever program is off the shelf that they can money launder money through, continues to send money to that regime. If that regime was not getting money, they wouldn't have the power they have. So the Iranian people are not saying, let's flip it. The opportunity cost of the United States stepping in has caused havoc and destruction. Now, again, the United States and the UK were the ones that originally put in the modern day government there. Can we stop messing around in places we don't belong? And why? For the oil. I believe that's the same reason why we just went into Venezuela. So back to childcare. So in California, as all this money is going to thousands of childcare facilities that are giving away free childcare to those that they deem qualified, not the ones that necessarily qualify, they went to over a handful of facilities within the first few hours. Just they're close to each other, right? They network. These crime syndicates share their information to help other people. And yet, you're going to be shocked. There weren't any kids. How are they getting millions of dollars a year to take care of children? They had no registration, no emergency contact, no check-in, check-out, no kids. And one particular facility had individuals there who hadn't even, adults who hadn't even had a background check, so they can't be on the property during working hours without a background check. But what's the flip side of that? As the individual continued to go on the list, and they just started with the A's and worked their way down, and as long as the story went on, she never got through the A's. There was so much crime and fraud in that section, she never got beyond it. She couldn't find any kids until she did. She found child care centers that had nice signs, lots of windows, an actual play facility, very clean areas to cook and prepare food, games and resources. Lots of, like you'd expect a child care center. And she'd walk in and she would be in an area that was away from the kids, but she could see the kids playing. And she asked for information, was handed brochures, a phone number to follow up, opportunity to schedule a tour. So it'd be safe for the kids, but somebody could walk with her. And then she told them what she was there for. And what she would hear back time and again is how much these childcare facilities were getting harassed. They were getting written up for things that didn't even happen and being forced out of business. So we've got honest people running daycare centers to help the community, and that can't be. But instead, the money is being stolen from taxpayers and given to individuals who are lying, don't have children there. And thank goodness they don't, because I can't even imagine the horror of what would happen to a child in a facility that is completing such levels of theft. Now, I know, again, as I talked about being a single mom and trying to find a role for my son, as I couldn't find one, I decided, okay, if I have to stay home with my child, then I'm going to find, sorry. See if we can fix that a little bit. I don't know what to do. I decided, okay, that I will open up a child care center. Well, in order to do so, I would have to spend, and I can't remember what the cost was now, tens of thousands of dollars to put a new sprinkler system throughout my home, because it was an older home and it had to have the sprinkler system. And the back of the house would have to be ripped off because the city had lost the permits for it, even though the old home owner had given me the permits that were approved. They wanted that removed. They wanted my entire electrical panel updated. And this is more than 20 years ago. It still in the last 2 decades hasn't needed. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It was about 10 years ago. Still hasn't needed to be updated. In fact, ended up putting solar panels on with that same panel. So it was cost prohibitive. There was no way that I could do it. And yet I saw people sitting next to me in all the licensing classes. And I would not let my child even on a bus with them, with other people, more or less, for them to run a facility. It's absolutely crazy what was happening. But these individuals were offered free programs. They could have kids come to them for free and get reimbursement from the city and county. And I knew back then there was a lot of theft, but I had no idea on the level that it actually was. So as we watch what's going on, where does it bring it to today? Because those of us speaking out get silenced. Right? I don't know. Let's see if this will show me here. Let's see if it'll do this. It's not showing. Oh, here we go. Let's see if this will change. There's a pop-up on my screen where I'm watching to make sure that the video stays on. And it says, do I want to report it? It won't go away. It just is trying to prompt me to report it. No, I don't know. I guess we've been on for about an hour now. And so far, there's nobody watching. And yet, on accounts that are not connected to mine, people just go live and they get people watching on and off. They might check in and see part of it and then move away. But not nobody at all ever seeing this. And at some point, I have to believe, based on what I'm seeing on YouTube or X or TikTok there's always somebody like you that wants to hear something. And as you've seen over the last month, every time I go live, there's several going lives before it finally takes, and then they sit there and then they block the camera from being used. So yes, we're being watched and monitored. We just don't know, and it's hard to have the evidence. But I do want to talk today in alignment with the Candace Owens conversation, Wolves in Finance. So let me see if I can grab his name. I think it was Greg DeGario. Let me see here. Okay, let's see here. Oh, Zach. I'm sorry, Zach DeGregorio. So he's got the Wolves and Finances channel that he's created. And he said, too, that he found something. He ended up losing his job and created this kind of on the side. He does a great job. I think his snippets are usually 20 to 30 minutes range where he does a story. And it's very, very well done what he's putting together. Well, he hopped on the TPUSA nonprofit stream and started looking into what does it mean to be a nonprofit? What does it mean to have the money moved around into different LLCs, the 990 reporting, where the locations are of the offices, what was there before. He really tied it all together, and it was really interesting. And in fact, he made a mistake. So he came out and immediately corrected it, and stated why that mistake happened, and went deeper into what other questions could be asked around it. Again, the quality of his questions in order to make sure that that doesn't happen. And yet he never got a response. He didn't get answers to his questions. He was just doing the best he could with the paperwork that was provided or wasn't actually properly filed and made available. What's interesting is in the last 24 hours, Zach made a post saying that TPUSA's attorney has now given him a cease and desist. And he said that this is the first step before a lawsuit. So he's actually scared, he says. Not scared of the lawsuit. I don't think any of us are, but scared of being financially broken. Because the last place you find truth is in a courtroom. If you ever get there, they bury you in running in circles and documents and errands you have to run for them and depositions. And it becomes a character weaponization tactic. It's all about ripping you apart and spitting you out, making sure that you can never take another step because you have the audacity to ask a question. Which again is why I brought up the GATE program or the MESA program. If you're on one side, or the child care program, if you're on the right side, I don't mean left and right, but if you're on one side, then you might be able to have more chances of life than the other. And in a DEI world, that's just where we stand. And so what's very interesting, and I suggest this is really worth going to, was Wolves and Finance, his YouTube channel. He's got a website as well, Wolves and Finance. You can become a member. You can support him with that. But he just, his video over the last, from whatever date this is today, when you see this, it's January 18th. He reads the notice that he gets from opposing counsel. And a lot is actually revealed there. So no, I don't think he's afraid or anybody afraid of being sued, because that's not really it. It's an opportunity to be truthful and honest. However, what it isn't is an opportunity for Wolves in Finance to have fairness. And that's what we're afraid of, is the bankruptcy. But on the flip side, during any lawsuit, both sides get deposed. And a lot of information will come out through a deposition if, in fact, TPUSA wants to go up against Candace Owens supporters and Candace Owens standing up for individuals. So in this case, if they go after Zach, and I'm sure they have letters prepared for other YouTubers as well, they're really claiming a pathway where a lot of fraud will come out. So again, that's Zach with Wolves and Finance. PG&E. I wanted to talk a little bit about Pacific Gas and Electric in California. So in California, there's different areas that have different utility companies. In the Bay Area here, it's PG&E. PG&E is split into two different companies. One is a nonprofit, and that's what we all know as PG&E Utility. And then there's PG&E Parent Company, which is extremely for-profit. In fact, back when I was doing consulting, I was sitting in the boardroom with the PG&E executives, and they were laughing that it was just like money was flowing in abundance, because the utility, they could request any amount that they wanted. They could just set it, right? Go to the, I can't think of the regulators that they lobby and get a price change. But in addition to being able to just set any amount they wanted, they said it was flowing in so fast, then the woman would come in and want some of the hard-earned money that the man was making. They were extremely misogynistic, very demeaning. And even though I had a seat at the table, I was constantly being asked to go get coffee for them. They had no idea why I was there or who paid me to be there. But they just saw me as somebody who would just go run. And so I played that role. And there's a lot that I heard. It's a huge racket and a manipulation. This isn't shocking to anybody because we are being watched. The game goes deeper and deeper. So PG&E did big commercials last year. They had 2 men in a car, working men, and they kept saying, no, rates are not going to go up next year. And PG&E made sure that rates would not go up next year. They made a big deal that going into people's homes, and they were saying that they were upset with PG&E, and trying to make good, honest conversations in somebody's living room. And yet everybody watching those commercials knew it was propaganda. It was manipulative. Well, here we go, January 1st, and we've got another rate increase. So there's a video that came out this morning, and the gentleman says, I have 27 solar panels, and I paid $8,000 to PG&E last year. $8,000. How do you do that? California is a temperate state. We don't get too hot, and we don't get too cold. Come here. And so how does somebody... Come on. How does somebody get to the point where they're paying that much money? Well, that's the question he was watching. He grabbed a ladder and he's up by his roof. In the background were all of these solar panels. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So he was saying that he spent $30,000 for all these solar panels so that he could, help with the environment and reduce his costs and save money. And so he gets his monthly bill and he gets his true-up bill. And then also he happened to notice that there's new charges on there. And PG&E actually states these are not new charges on their bill in bold print, which helps me to believe that they knew that people are going to say, hey, this is new. And they know it's not new. Yes, it is. I show you no, it's not new. They just continue to gaslight and lie. And at some point, it's comical if it wasn't just another way to dip in your pockets and take all your money out. Do we not have anything left? Well, if you do, that'll be taken as well. I can't even go through the whole list right now of all of the bank accounts that I got locked out of over the last few years. And that's on top of the decade before that, where if you left money in your bank account for more than 12 months, the state of California decided, well, you abandoned it. It now belongs to them, even if it's a savings account. I just got locked because of cybersecurity, right? They want to control it. They lock down accounts. You can see that you have an account. They just won't let you inside. And they don't have locations anymore. So there's no door you can knock on to get help. So this guy is noticing too that he also has to pay, in addition to his monthly and in addition to his true up with PG&E, another true up with the city of San Jose. And the city of San Jose had gone through a process of embedding them in as a middleman. The city of San Jose doesn't have anything to do with this other than they split the difference between generation and delivery of the utility. They're not generating it. In fact, this man is generating it with his solar panels. He generates it and sells anything that he doesn't use back to utility for 8 cents. And yet they bill him 47 cents. Now, he said that he could do this in off period and change his whole life, like do his dishwasher and dishes in the middle of the night for 43 cents. So to save 4 cents, it doesn't make sense. The markup is massive on everything that he's pulled out of pocket in order to support the system. And once again, the goalpost keeps moving. PG&E keeps changing the rules on which side of the roof the sun panels can catch during which hours so it doesn't impinge on the margins. It's just another form of theft. So the city of San Jose during lockdowns held a meeting that nobody could attend. Even if we heard about it and we tried to protest it, we could not attend. And it said that they were going to automatically put all people into this plan that had solar panels and take their percentage. So my bill tripled so that they could take their percentage. Here we go. Here's a little guy. When he gets really relaxed, he just kind of hangs his little tongue out a little bit. Why did San Jose need to do that? So I went to a Rotary Club meeting, and at the Rotary Club meeting, okay, come on, we're going down, okay? You done? I love you too. You done? Okay, good. I went to a Rotary Club meeting, and they happened to have somebody from the City of San Jose Energy Program there. And so I asked some questions. Well, first of all, the individual had recently graduated from an environmental studies program, had no understanding of what it means to own a home or to have solar panels or what the utility companies actually do or anything about business. But she was given a slide presentation and to come out to us and give us one lie after another. And I knew she was going, so I didn't mean to be rude, but I had receipts, I had the documentation, the conversations I had my statements. And she outright lied to me. Well, it would be a lie if she actually knew the truth, but I don't think she knew the truth. She was fed lies, and she just repeated them like a parrot. And she gave me a business card to follow up, and multiple of us from that meeting followed up, and none of us ever heard back. It was one lie after another. And this is what they just do until you shut up. And if you don't shut up, they cut you off. So we knew that the environmental scam is really a scam. It has nothing to do with making the planet better. And solar panels was just the flavor of the decade. Whether it continues or not, or now we have to take all the solar panels off and put them in a pile because they only last for a couple decades. What's that going to do to the environment? The only way not to, my mother had several homes next to each other, and she's never been allowed to install solar panels because then she would be accused of creating her own competing utility against PG&E, and that's not acceptable. It has nothing to do with the environment. It has to do with levels of control and manipulation. And look at all the taxpayer money and money out of pockets that went into buying into solar infrastructure, all the way up until the point of when Gavin Newsom himself stepped in and stopped the programs. And now solar companies have been coming up with all kinds of different ways to try to get money out of your pocket to continue with that. So again, the quality of our questions really does affect the quality of our life and the quality of our outcome. Whether we're using a ChatGPT as an AI prompt or figuring out what location we're going to live in. So at this point, we're at 118. Let me put this here. I want to talk about this 82-year-old woman. It sounds like she's going to be doing a story on the news. So until that comes out, I'm not going to go too much into the personal aspect. So I'm going to kind of leave some holes here. But there needs to be an awareness of the depth of the crime that's happening. Back in 2006, so it was a lady and her husband bought their home in the 1980s. It was around $200,000. And they paid it off right away because they didn't have children, and they were both senior professionals, so they had an abundance of cash flow, and they just paid down the home really fast. They enjoyed life. They did a lot of they lived a very, very nice lifestyle. And unbeknownst to this woman, in 2006, a company called Washington Mutual, it's a bank, apparently took out an almost $1 million loan against this property. Now, if we back up, about that same time, in fact, exactly that same time, and about exactly that same year, it might have been 2007, I had a Washington Mutual mortgage. And I would walk into their bank and have them take my check, make a copy of the check, and give me a receipt, and I would then walk back to work. And I did this every month. And I'm not so old that direct deposit wasn't valid and there weren't other options. Could have mailed the check. But when I mailed the check, they wouldn't get it. Or, very strangely, they would receive it, and then the funds would be reversed, and then they'd send me a letter that they didn't get it, or they got it late. So I would walk into the branch to get proof, and it would be stamped, of course, the receipt with the date. And yet they would still hold it for another couple weeks before they would credit it. It was a Washington Mutual loan, and I would go into the Washington Mutual branch. They ended up going out of business. I believe it was probably Chase that bought them. I'd have to double check that. And it came out, all the mortgage fraud that this company did. It was massive. And what they would do is hold on to checks and then try to give modifications to the homeowner so that the homeowner would change the terms of the mortgage. First of all, it would increase the amount you paid initially. But if you're restarting a mortgage, let's just say it's a standard 30-year, and you refi after, let's say, 5 years, the biggest cost is the amount that you've already paid in interest, because all the mortgages start with interest pay downs first. You don't really get to that principal until you're towards the end of the loan. So if you keep starting it over, you're always paying interest, and you never get that back. So finally, I just went and got another mortgage company because the games were getting so difficult, and it was extremely stressful, and just the lies and lack of integrity of this company. And then, as I stated, they ended up going out of business, and a lot of the news started to come out. Well, in 2006, apparently, they took out a loan against this woman's property. She'd never done business with them before, or after, or even in that moment. But because it's so far back now, we cannot get any notary records to find out who signed the paperwork, what was the thumbprint, what was the documentation. That's all gone. So if we fast forward over the next several decades, and for her, it actually started in 2007, she got a notice of default for about $43,000 for not paying interest on the loan that she never took out. So she started fighting for her home at that point. Her husband had already passed. She had no children. There was nobody else that would be authorized to take equity out of her home. She went through several notice of default cycles, and each time she would be offered the modification. Now, a modification is when they offer you a change in terms, like I mentioned, but what it is, it's in 3 steps. You make the first payment, and then you make the second payment, and then you make the third payment, and then they decide that, oh yes, okay, you are qualified, you can actually handle this payment, so we will complete the portion of the mod, and then those are going to be the new payment terms. But the banks don't allow the third payment to be made. They either cancel the check, they return the money, they say they didn't get it, because they don't want the mod, they're trying to seize the properties. So she would go down to the bank and pay the amount. And it went on and on and on. She eventually did electronic payments to make sure that it was shown the electronic payment every month through an automatic withdrawal, so it'd be set. And she said they would go in 2 or 3 times a month and take all kinds of different amounts and then say that they didn't get any of that. But at least now she had tracking from the other bank showing that the withdrawals were happening. Then finally, she got an attorney, and the attorney told her she needed to file bankruptcy. And she said, I have no debt. She paid cash for everything. She worked multiple jobs. She had long since retired, and her husband had left her funds. She's, I have no debt. There's no reason to do that. They said, well, the problems with this home have not stopped. So the only way for you to put a stay on the property is to file bankruptcy. That'll stop anyone from taking your home. And if they do take your home, or they went through this whole game with her. So she filed bankruptcy, but with the protection of the home. So she got that. That didn't stop them either. They don't care. And so in March of 2024, after church, she was in her home. 2 police officers and 2 other people knocked on her door, pushed their way in, started roughing her up and harassing her, threatening her that if she didn't leave, she was going to be arrested for trespassing, and pushed her out the door. Really absolutely stunned and shaken, she just stood in the front yard trying to figure out how's this happening? Eventually, she got in her car and has lived in her car ever since. She doesn't understand how this could happen. In fact, if you talk to her today, she say it can't happen. It's still her home. They're just living in it. Well, I met her because she was in court. The organization that bought this home, or the individual that bought this home under the precept of an organization, was getting a restraining order against her. They didn't want her hanging around the house anymore, not in the house or even stepping foot on the property. They didn't want her around the street with their friends. And so I was sitting there in court listening to them and hearing this woman saying, oh, yes, that's true. Yes, that's true. Yes, that's true. But let me tell you what actually is going on. And they would never let her say anything. They would just allow her to agree and then not say her side, while they totally berated her. And then apparently got a temporary restraining order against her. So I offered her my number and I asked if sometime we could go to lunch and figure out what's going on. I didn't know. In fact, something was pulling me in that direction. And so I the individual who was suing her had talked to me before he even went in and told me that he buys homes that are with clouded title. He used a different terminology and he knows it. So what he does is he goes in and tries to flip them quickly so he's not responsible. So he knew what he was doing. So after the hearing was over, I wanted to understand what they had just gotten, because nobody else had gotten a restraining order that day. The judge told everybody no and said it couldn't be against a property. It would have to be against an individual. And the individual would have to prove that they were in imminent harm based on historic harm. Well, this isn't it. She'd never met this guy before. And so we wanted to know exactly what was agreed to. So we went down to the clerk to get a copy of the order. We went a few days later as well to get a copy of the order. They didn't have it ready. Opposing counsel for the one who sued her hadn't filed it yet. So even though there was an order on the book, she couldn't get a copy of the order or understand what she was being restricted from doing. That wasn't allowed. It was never mailed to her. They never told her. And even when we asked the parameters of what it could be, we were told we just had to wait. Well, her attorney told her that because the people who bought the house kept breaking off the locks of the house and the gate, that she could pull up and sit in her car as long as she called a police officer so that they could monitor and give her an orange card verifying that she was there. And then somebody could go up to the door for this 82-year-old woman and put locks on it, and then she'd leave the key with them, whatever on the porch or whatever she could do. But just so that, because you got to remember, she was removed. All of her stuff was still in there, all of her life belongings, and she wasn't allowed to go inside in order to get the items. So she would do this over and over again. However, one day she called the police. She was sitting in her car. She was waiting for the locksmith. 2 officers showed up, and the officers told her, one officer stayed across the street apparently and told the other one to leave her alone, but one of them made her get out of her car, pushed her on the ground, arrested her, and put her in the back seat of the car, took her down to book her, mugshot and fingerprints, and wouldn't let her leave until she contacted bail bondsman and bailed out, meaning there was an arrest. She was then given a folder that had a case number in it. There was no arrest record in there. There was all the stuff that would normally be in there was not in there. There was a case number, and that's all we had to go from. So that case meant she had to appear in court on a specific day. So I went with her. And I'll come back with part 2 of the story.